Welcome back to another episode of Vikings Latest. I'm your host, Cole Smith, and today we're going to talk about the Vikings general manager search and who is going to be handling these duties, how Rob Brzezinski still falls into the search itself, and one of the companies that is going to be helping lead this search. But first, we're going to start with the first official interview that the Vikings have set up with an external candidate, and that is Terrence Gray, assistant GM for the Bills in 2025. Vikings have familiarity with him. Gray spent the 2006 to 2016 seasons under Rick Spielman as a Vikings area scout. So he has familiarity with the Wilfs. He knows how things are done in the Vikings building, but he is also an outside source who's learned under Brandon Beane the past 9 years with the Bills. He was director of player personnel. He got that title prior to the 2022 season up until he became assistant GM in 2025. And then in 2021, he was elevated to assistant director of player personnel for the Bills after spending the past few seasons before that, just working his way up through the front office. So he's kind of done the traditional steps, traditional climb through the ranks to get up to assistant GM. If he were to get GM, obviously that's like every scout's dream at some point for the most part. So he's worked his way up from area scout with Spielman. So that helps build like a lot of respect in the building. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, of course, he had that economics degree, used to work with Wall Street, didn't have the traditional scouting background, wasn't the traditional film grinder, and that sometimes rubs people the wrong way. You know how it is when if in your line of work, if you've been with a company for a while and you finally get a good position, but you used to be at the bottom of the totem pole, you look at some people who kind of skip a few steps. You kind of look at them a little bit differently. If they aren't doing everything up to the standard, it is very easy to poke holes in how they do things. Somebody on the Vikings coaching staff, Brian Flores, before he became a coach with the Patriots, he started out as a scout with New England. So even he could be nitpicking how Kwesi was doing things in a way that maybe other general managers normally would. And so he could even be scrutinizing things even more outside of just, hey, the guys that you selected in the draft aren't working out. Guys that you got in free agency aren't working out. Terrence Gray kind of gets you that traditional background that helps build a lot of respect through the building. He was also with the Chiefs prior to joining the Vikings 2003 to 2005. He was player development and player personnel. And before that, he played college football at Oregon State after playing a couple years for Palomar College, where his coach, Tom Kraft, called Terrence Gray a tremendous leader. So that's all the background that I really got. I think he's 47 years old, or 46, and turning 47. So still not too old for a GM. This is going to kind of mend things a little bit if the Vikings were to go this direction. A new outside perspective with familiarity. So it's not like a complete unknown, but you are also getting some outside ideas. That's why I've kind of been against just straight up promoting Rob Brzezinski without looking at other people. I don't want to get so scared of the unknown that we just completely block out any new ideas. This would be kind of getting things back to the Spielman days without being like completely Spielman. Brandon Beane and the Bills, if it weren't for the Chiefs, they would be probably one of the, a dynasty, or if not, they'd have at least one or two rings under their belt. So I do like this. Keep an eye on this. There's going to be more GM interviews set up after this, but it does sound like Gray is kind of at the forefront for top lists, top candidates for the Vikings outside of the organization. So who's going to be handling the GM search? That's kind of the question. The Vikings released a statement last week that Turnkey ZRG, I think that's how you pronounce it, uh, or how you say it, they are going to be the search firm that is going to be handling the coaching search or the GM search. A lot of people were kind of turned off by this initially because in the statement it said that Turnkey ZRG is associated with AI, kind of uses AI to help find candidates. And some people get like icked out and everything. They don't like hearing AI, but it can be used as a tool. Chad Chatlis and Sean McGee, they're part of the partnership with Turnkey ZRG, who will be working with the Vikings. They graduated from the Naval Academy, both of them decades ago. McGee, he's been the GM of Michigan's football program the past 3 seasons, or since 2024 anyway. Chatlis, he was part of the Indiana committee that hired Kurt Signetti. So they have football experience, they have sports experience. If you go to the website, they have partnerships with the 49ers, the Steelers, the Rams, the Chiefs. They're going to be helping the NFLPA find their new director. So it's not like a complete unknown. It's not like a completely unknown commodity. It's not a new thing that the Wilfs are doing. But it does make some people wonder, like, hey, what are the Wilfs doing? It's heard about like potential sale of the team last week, and that got shut down. But right now, everybody's just a little weirded out. Nobody really knows what's going on. Alec Lewis mentioned how everybody in the league is kind of closely monitoring this GM search, although even though they're intrigued by like getting Justin Jefferson, intrigued by the coaching staff. Alec Lewis specifically mentions it's a sharp coaching staff led by KOC, and that it is a respected organization for potential free agents to come sign here. People do want to come to Minnesota. He did say that the fact that it's been over 3 months since they fired Quasey and still have yet to fill the GM spot, that does have some people apathetic, or not apathetic. I don't know if that's a word for it, but like uneasy about what the direction is. Like, is an outside GM going to be able to bring all his people in? Like, these guys have to be able to work with Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. KOC and Brian Flores have had significant say in player personnel, player acquisition throughout the years. Quasey was never able to really mend that together with the scouting side, the personnel side, and the coaching side. Hoping that somebody is able to fit well with not only KOC but Brian Flores, kind of bring that vision together, and that can be both like intriguing, but also like, does it limit the pool of who's going to be interested? It's very fascinating how this is going to work out, because this is a little backwards from how it usually is. Usually we see the GM who hires the coach. Quasey did that with KOC. This time it's kind of the opposite. So Kevin O'Connell is definitely going to have some sort of say. But yeah, it's going to be how much turnover is this team willing to allow an outside GM to turn over? It almost makes you think that the team wanted Rob Brzezinski to manage free agency and the draft, so that outside guy didn't just completely form his new own vision through the 2026 offseason. It's like, okay, we steered the ship this way. This is how we want things to be done moving forward. And you're going to have to kind of abide by our rules. We'll see if it works out moving forward. But right now, that's what Alec Lewis is kind of gathering as well. We're going to move forward to how Rob Brzezinski falls into this, because Brzezinski is still a candidate for the role, which kind of complicates all this. This is kind of getting to flood into the next slide as well, the next topic. But he kind of helped stabilize the relationship between the personnel department and coaching staff, according to Alec Lewis. That because from everything that we had heard, Kwesi Adolfo, he did a poor job at mending the scouting side, the personnel side, with the coaching side. It was kind of like he couldn't juggle all the visions, all the input that he was getting, and forming it into one cohesive vision. It sounds like Brzezinski was able to, kind of like we were just saying a moment ago, kind of able to help get all this, everybody on the same page, everybody moving forward, even if there's differing opinions, everything's moving towards the same end goal. And you're not going, every which way. Uh, from what Alec Lewis said, Rob Brzezinski worked with KOC and Flores. We knew this to produce the draft, but Alec Lewis said that the draft went, quote, mostly according to plan. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if we've been talking about wide receiver two a lot. I don't know if they were really expecting to get somebody on day two and that just didn't happen. So mostly went according to plan. Probably a lot better than how it's been in the past few years. But Brzezinski, he could still be elevated to a different role that's not GM. Kind of helps oversee what the GMs do and kind of communicate between the GM and KOC and Flores. Like I said, he has a good relationship with not just KOC and Flores, but the entire organization. He's been with the team since 1999. He knows the Vikings organization better than anybody, maybe even the Wolves. That might be too far, but I mean, Rob Brzezinski really knows everything. So I can't imagine that a GM is going to be hired and then they're just kicking Rob Brzezinski out the door. So the Vikings, according to Lewis, they're looking for a staffer with ties to college and NFL. That'd be somebody like Terrence Gray, who could funnel intel to and across all areas of the staff. Kind of like I said, you're just trying to communicate things, try to get everybody on the same page, even if not everybody's agreeing with like a specific, player acquisition, specific aspect of how things are being done. You're still moving towards the same goal, and everybody can kind of see what the vision is. And like I said, Quasey just wasn't doing that. If they were to do something like this, where you're elevating Brzezinski, he kind of helps mend all that together. Kind of sets up a similar setup to how it was with Rick Spielman back in the day before he got fired. With George Payton, who was kind of like the assistant GM at the time. Brzezinski was in that power structure as well with Mike Zimmer. So it kind of blends GM with like whatever president of football operations, Brzezinski, whatever his title would be. It's kind of like the old triangle of authority, if you remember that from back in the Brad Childress days between Brzezinski, Spielman, and Brad Childress. Something like that. It kind of makes it hard to determine who's exactly making all the calls. But that it sounds like the Vikings are trying to make it go back towards how things were done with Spielman and Zimmer to a degree. Like I said, that's maybe why somebody like Terrence Gray makes a lot of sense. We're going to go to who is making the final decision then in this hiring process. Alec Lewis says it's Mark and Ziggy Wilf, but he mentions like a bunch of people after that. Andrew Miller, chief operating officer, he was very prominent in the Quasey hire. We heard that Andrew Miller was probably the one that really dissuaded everybody from getting on board to hire Jim Harbaugh. If you remember Harbaugh, it sounded like for several days he was a cinch to get the Vikings head coaching job, and then like he just didn't, and then it was Kevin O'Connell. Sounds like Andrew Miller played a massive role in that. Depending on how you feel about Kevin O'Connell, you can thank Andrew Miller for that. And Kevin O'Connell is very close with Andrew Miller, from what I hear. Small internal advisory committee will support the process. That would involve Miller most likely. Now, here's where things get interesting. Alec Lewis said that usually Rob Brzezinski is a part of these decisions. However, if he's a candidate, how does, like, how can he be part of these decisions if he's obviously going to be biased towards himself? How are other people who are close with Brzezinski, how are they going to be able to, have an objective look at this hiring process? They probably are close with Brzezinski. They've probably been wanting him to be getting some sort of promotion, a GM job. They probably think he's done a really good job as being a capologist through the years. They could be biased in this. So that could cloud judgment of everybody. KOC would have a say. How does that all work out? This could ultimately come down to why the Wilfs hired turnkey ZRG with all these internal biases and everything. Wilfs wants somebody more like Spielman. People might want Brzezinski just because they work with him. You like people who you're familiar with. That could be where Chatless and McGee become very key in this as independent people, independent viewpoints to hire the best person. If that's Rob Brzezinski, great, but make sure that it's based off of merit and it's what is best for the team, not just because, hey, that's my friend. I'd really like to see him stay in this role because it's been cool the past 3 months. I've known him for years. We want to see him get the promotion. Chatless and McGee could cut that out and get right to, hey, Brzezinski is getting this job, this promotion, permanent GM, because he deserves it, not just because we are friends with him. So That's why you hire Turnkey ZRG. We will actually go more into Turnkey ZRG because I went to their webpage earlier for background on this, and I was like, this deserves like its whole episode or several segments at least, because I was just gonna touch on it, and I was like, there's a lot more here. So we're gonna go on to that tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow. We'll get more into this search firm and how they are going to be handling things, how they've handled things in the past for other NFL teams and other sporting organizations, and how that could impact the Vikings moving forward. So that's all I got for today. A lot of just GM talk. And Terrence Gray, like I said, he's going to be the first big time outside external GM candidate for the Vikings. Alec Lewis said that this process should just continue to ramp up as the week progresses. So we should have some more names. If we have more names pop up, we'll go over them either tomorrow and into next week. So that's all I got for today. Tune in tomorrow for more on Turnkey ZRG and how they are going to help the Vikings hire their next GM. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to Vikings Latest. I really appreciate everybody who's already watched the past couple weeks. It's been super fun. Skull Vikings. Hopefully, we get some confirmation soon on who the next GM is going to be. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in.